Hey guys, in this video I'm going to be talking about learning target 2. You will understand the importance of the atmosphere, composition, and its layers. We're first going to talk about what the atmosphere is. It's a mixture of air or gases that surround the Earth. This picture is a picture of the atmosphere taken from space. And as you can see, the atmosphere stretches from sea level all the way to the outer parts of space. How does the atmosphere help living things? Two of the most important nutrients for living things are water and carbon. The atmosphere helps recycle these really important nutrients for living things. For example, in this first diagram, you see the water cycle. We learned about the water cycle last week. But without the atmosphere, clouds would not be able to form, and precipitation or rain would not be able to rain back down. All living things need this water in order to survive. And the atmosphere helps facilitate that. Another really important nutrient that we didn't really talk about but you should know is carbon. Carbon is found mostly as carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And as you know, the atmosphere is air, and some of the air is made out of this important molecule. All living things need carbon to live, and the way that it gets recycled is that in plants, carbon dioxide gets fixed through photosynthesis. Living things will eat the plants that has carbon in it, and the cells will use it. We also breathe out carbon dioxide through respiration. How does the atmosphere interact with the sun? The atmosphere helps block some of the most harmful rays from the sun. They reflect them or absorb them. As you can see in this diagram, the sun emits different kinds of radiation. Some of the radiation actually bounces back into space before it even reaches the Earth. Luckily for us, some of these rays are not going to reach us or living things because they could be very harmful. As you can also see in this diagram, some of the sun's rays also get absorbed by the molecules and air in the atmosphere. How does the atmosphere affect Earth's temperature? The gases that surround the Earth act kind of like a blanket. If you think about a blanket, when you put a blanket over your body, it traps heat that gets emitted from our bodies inside of the blanket. Very similarly, the atmospheric layer around the Earth acts like a blanket, so if some radiation from the sun comes into the Earth, the atmosphere traps it, and this heat is used to warm habitats and can be used for living things, such as reptiles and other cold-blooded animals that need the radiation and heat. How does the atmosphere work with the water cycle? Water can evaporate into the Earth's atmosphere to create clouds. I already reviewed this earlier, but without the atmosphere, we would not have condensation or precipitation. This water cycle is crucial to all living things. How does the atmosphere create weather? The atmosphere heats up differently in different parts of the Earth. We're going to go in more detail about this in a few weeks, but the basic thing is that the way the Earth is shaped, as well as how it revolves around the sun, actually affects how the sun heats up different parts of the atmosphere. And because of this, we have different weather patterns. And this is a picture of a typical weather forecast. And as you can see there's cold in some areas and warm in other areas. And we'll learn more about how air moves because of this in a few weeks. How does the atmosphere affect mountains, rocks, and glaciers? So the atmosphere causes different kinds of weather and temperatures, as we saw in the last slide. One of the reasons why rocks are able to break apart is actually because of the weather. In this diagram, you can see how water that gets trapped, let's say inside of a rock, and if temperatures drop, this water will freeze into ice, which will expand, causing the rock to split. And that's how this rock actually split in half. This actually, if you repeat this process over and over, it can actually change the surface of the Earth and create new landforms, which ultimately affects the habitats. Finally, how does the atmosphere allow us to hear sounds? So sound is a form of energy, And as you know, energy can move from one place to another. The way sound moves is it is produced from one end and it travels through the air through vibrations. And as you can see in this diagram, because air is made out of molecules, sound moves from one area to another by traveling through these molecules. And when these molecules are vibrating because of the sound, it eventually reaches our ears, which allow us to hear. Now let's talk about what kind of gases make up the atmosphere. As you can see in this diagram, 78% of the atmosphere is actually nitrogen. 20% is oxygen, which we breathe in. A very small percentage, 0.93%, is argon. A very small percentage is also carbon dioxide. And we also have very, very small traces of the following gases. We have neon, helium, methane, water vapor, krypton, hydrogen, xenon, and ozone. Now we're going to talk about the layers of the atmosphere. In this diagram, we can see 5 layers. There's debate, or 4 layers, I'm sorry. There's debate whether there's another layer on top of this last layer, which is the thermosphere, which is called the exosphere. But we're going to focus on these 4 layers in particular. The first layer is called the troposphere. This is the lowest layer of the atmosphere. It stretches about 7 miles above the Earth's surface, and it holds about most of the world's gases, 75% in fact. The weather that we see on Earth all happens within the troposphere, and most of the things that we experience, such as rain and all the clouds, they form in the troposphere. The layer above there is called the stratosphere. One of the most important things about the stratosphere is that it contains a layer called the ozone layer. The ozone basically is a type of molecule that's made out of 3 oxygen atoms, as you can see in this diagram. And the reason why it's so important for us is that this is the layer that actually protects us from harmful UV or ultraviolet radiation from the sun. UV radiation is one of the reasons why we get skin cancer. It could also really damage our skin, not just human skin, but for other living things as well. So protecting this ozone layer is actually really important. What is the mesosphere? The mesosphere is the 3rd layer above the stratosphere. It rises, it's about 53 miles above the Earth's surface, and actually it has very few molecules of gas that can absorb the sun's heat. One of the key things that happen in the mesosphere is that meteors that come from outer space actually burn up in the mesosphere, creating a tail like this. So a lot of the meteors, the reason why they burn up is because when it hits the mesosphere, it actually burns into the shiny light. The last layer we're going to talk about today is the thermosphere. The thermosphere is the 4th layer above the mesosphere. It reaches about 321 to 621 miles above the ground. And this layer actually absorbs harmful UV radiation and X-rays from the sun as well. It has a very high temperature because of this. The phenomenon called the northern lights can also be found in this layer. And also, many satellites actually are orbiting Earth in this layer.